Dear students, welcome to the 31st session, which is on the Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens, prescribed by the Mangalore University for third semester BA Optional English, Paper 3, Victorian Literature. This is Vasanta Ravi Prakash, Associate Professor, Department of English, Purnaprajna College, Udupi. This video highlights the last few chapters, that is 53 to 57 of the novel The Pickwick Papers. Let us see what we have learned in the previous session. We heard the ghost story about the bagman's uncle, which proves that men get into heroic deeds to please women. Dickens next turned into romantic side. Mr. Winkle and Arabella Winkle seek their parents' blessings for their marriage, and Pickwick acts as a mediator. We have come across the confrontation between the two editors from Eatanswill. Finally, Sam Weller's stepmother dies, leaving her money to Mr. Weller and Sam, much to Mr. Stiggins's annoyance. Arabella gets to know about Mr. Pickwick's meeting with Mr. Winkle's father. Mr. Pickwick assures her that Mr. Winkle will not cast off her husband, who is Mr. Winkle's son, because he has married Arabella, who is not very rich. He takes Mr. Perker's advice to arrange things. Mr. Pickwick encounters Mr. Jingle and Jock Trotter at Mr. Perker's law office. Pickwick arranges for Mr. Jingle to take a position in the West Indies. Mr. Perker offers Jock Trotter a job in his office, but Jock Trotter prefers to move with his friend Jingle and to do service to him. There is a change in the characters of Mr. Jingle and Jock Trotter. They assure to repay the money which Pickwick has paid for them. Pickwick, by helping those who ill-treated him, proves his magnanimity. Mr. Waddle arrives at Perker's office to seek his advice. Mr. Waddle gets to know that his daughter, Emily, is in love with Snodgrass. Mr. Waddle accepts Mr. Snodgrass' proposal to marry his daughter, Emily, unlike Ben Allen, who refused to get Arabella Allen to marry Winkle. Sam and his father meet Mr. Pell, the lawyer, to discuss the affairs of the late Mrs. Weller. They wanted to wrap her past affairs amicably. Pell requires to visit several places to deal with a simple will. By the time Mr. Weller and Sam receive the property, the one-page will is converted into mass of papers. For the first time, we come across a honest lawyer who helps his client to get the money. The fact that Dickens did not trust lawyers seems to be exposed in these chapters. Mr. Pell manages to make a lot of money with a simple case of Mr. Weller and Sam. Mr. Pickwick is visited by Sam and his father with a request to handle Mr. Weller's money. Mr. Pickwick broaches the topic of Mary, who is a love lady of Sam Weller. The Pickwick Club is dissolved by Mr. Pickwick, and he settles down in a new house near London. Emily gets married to Mr. Snodgrass. The Winkles and the Snodgrass settle down to marital life. Mr. Tupman continues to flirt with elderly ladies living nearby. Sam and Mary eventually get married. Mr. Weller retires and enjoys the money that Mr. Pickwick has invested for him. Meanwhile, Mr. Jingle and Job remain far away. They turn into worthy members of society. Mr. Pickwick serves as godfather to many of his friends' children. The novel ends on a happy note. Pickwick retires from travel. Mr. Pickwick started off as a pompous and foolish old man. His character develops through the covers of the novel. He becomes kinder and less foolish. He turns out to be gentle and good. He is rewarded with a happy life. We have come to the end of this novel. Let me give you the highlights of the novel. Pickwick forms a club with 4 members, and his purpose is to explore life and the human beings. Dickens gives lots of messages through the interpolated stories which come in between the novel. Pickwick was very innocent in the beginning, and he faces consequences due to this. Sam happens to be a great support to Mr. Pickwick. Eventually, we see a moral development in Pickwick's life. Now, we come across women like Mrs. Bardell, Mrs. Pott, so on and so forth, who represent the Victorian age. And towards the end, especially when Pickwick was in the debtor's prison, his magnanimity is exposed completely. He helps all the prisoners by giving them money. He even helps Mr. Jingle and Job Trotter, who plotted against him. This shows the moral development of Pickwick, and Sam supports him completely. And the story ends with a happy note. Let us now see the multiple choice questions. Question number 1. Arabella gets to know about Mr. Pickwick's meeting with. The options are Sam Weller's father, Job Trotter, Mr. Winkle's father, and Mr. Wardle. The answer is Mr. Winkle's father. We shall go to the second question. Mr. Pickwick arranges for Dash to take a position in the West Indies. The options are Mr. Jingle, Sam Weller, Job Trotter, Mr. Winkle. The answer is Mr. Winkle. The third question. Whose love for Mr. Snodgrass is disclosed? Arabella's, Emily's, Mary's, none of the above. Emily's love for Mr. Snodgrass is disclosed. We shall go to the fourth question now. Dash continues to flirt with elderly ladies. Is it Sam Weller, or Mr. Pickwick, or Mr. Tupman, or Mr. Snodgrass? The answer is Mr. Tupman. Finally, we go to the fifth question. Who retires and enjoys the money that Mr. Pickwick has invested for him? Is it Mr. Weller, or Sam Weller, or Mr. Tupman, or none of the above? Mr. Weller is Sam Weller's father. We shall see the answer now. It is Mr. Weller who is Sam Weller's father, retires and enjoys the money that Mr. Pickwick has invested for him. We come to the end of this session. Thank you.